hello and welcome to Newsroom live from Islamabad. I'm your host Sharmeen Ali. In the 228th Corps Commanders meeting, the regional situation was discussed by the top military brass, which was attended also by General Qamar Javed Bajwa, who's the Chief of Army Staff. The issues of the geopolitical security and peace were discussed in light of the recent statements by the Indian Army Chief about Pakistan and the fact that he has said that he will move to claim Azad Jammu and Kashmir if given orders by the Parliament. So they discussed this situation as well as the situation on the Western Front with Iran and the United States, and the entire stability of the region was discussed in this meeting. We'll be talking about that. And the DGISPR has been giving responses periodically to these statements by the Indian Army's chief, saying that the statements of the Indian military leadership against Pakistan are an irresponsible rhetoric with implications of regional peace and stability. And naturally, Pakistan can befittingly respond like they did with the Pulwama attacks in February. Also, we are going to be talking about the extreme weather that the country is facing. Hundreds of lives have been lost due to this weather, due to avalanches and heavy snowfall and heavy rain. The majority of the casualties have been in Azad Jammu and Kashmir, where people have been buried under avalanches. In Balochistan, we're seeing due to snowfall, major roads are closed, so families are stranded there in the cold. At the moment, the death tolls are over 50 people in Azad Jammu and Kashmir, 30 in Balochistan, and nearly a dozen in Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. And this state of emergency has been declared in several districts due to these extreme weather events, which are naturally being caused by climate change. Due to this phenomenon, we're seeing extreme heat, and now in the winter we're seeing extreme cold weather in parts of the country as well. We're going to begin with the first topic in our program today, which is the most recent Corps Commanders meeting where the regional situation was discussed. Let's have a look first at this report.
The United Nations Security Council is all set to hold a meeting on the situation in occupied Kashmir. The body is likely to receive a briefing by the UN Military Observer Group over the situation along the line of control, where several civilians and soldiers have been martyred due to Indian aggression. This is the second time in 6 months that the United Nations Security Council has called a meeting over occupied Kashmir as the region continues to suffer from a government-imposed lockdown. The United Nations Security Council had held a consultative meeting in August last year after the Indian government imposed a lockdown and communications blackout and repealed the special status of occupied region. Meanwhile, taking account of repeated provocative statements of Indian military leadership regarding aggression against Pakistan, Pakistan Army's top brass termed it as irresponsible rhetoric with implications on regional peace and stability. Ever since General Naravane assumed the command of the Indian Army on December 31st, he has made a number of aggressive statements, including one on occupying Azad Kashmir and another about the alleged killing of a civilian porter of his army. Pakistan on multiple occasions cautioned about the possibility of India undertaking a military misadventure against Pakistan. The threat of such a misstep has increased because of the aggravating domestic situation in India due to widespread and large-scale protests against a controversial citizenship law and the National Register of Citizens.
We now have with us online Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodi, who's a senior analyst. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on our program. Sir, thank you for joining us on our program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Sir, I'd like to ask you now, we've just seen that the 228th Corps Commanders Conference was held on Tuesday, discussing the region's geopolitical situation, and in light of the recent comments by the newly appointed Indian Army Chief, General Manoj Naravane, that the Indian Army is ready to invade Azad Jammu and Kashmir at any time if the Parliament instructs them to do so. Sir, what are your remarks on this and the decision that's being taken right now at this level?
Thank you very much. I think this Corps Commanders Conference was held under peculiar environment. And why do I say that? One, we've just been through a very tense period. There was a standoff, very serious standoff between America and Iran, Iran being our neighbor, and also, some Middle Eastern countries were involved. Then the statements which you are talking about, the Kashmir situation, which is, moving relentless in the same direction, the 6 month going, and no respite for the Kashmiris. And of course, there's a sort of stalemate in the Afghan situation. The things are not moving forward as was being expected. So under all this, I am sure they must have, discussed all this. And these statements, especially which you are referring to, are very, very serious in nature, because if you just compare the two sides, that how the attitude, that what sort of statements are coming from across the border and what statements are we issuing as a responsible state. You will never hear a very belligerent statement from the Pakistani side. We keep on saying that we have all the means available to defend ourselves, and we'll go to any extent to make sure that we defend our interests and defend our motherland. But from the other side, the statements are, if I say, quite stupid. But still, I would suggest we should not take it lightly, because now it is a nexus of extremist army and extremist government. And whatever the BJP government has been saying earlier, more or less they have been doing it also. We have been thinking that was, initially we painted that their statements to be election rhetorics or something, and then actually that happened. So even this is this should not be taken as a rhetoric, although it seems quite stupid, because two nuclear powers, they cannot go to open war the way their chief is saying. But if he's asking permission from the parliament, I think that permission will come promptly, because majority is BJP, in the government. So I don't know what is in his mind, and what does he want to prove. But one thing is sure, that we must take up this thing very seriously at international forums, and we must sensitize the international community that what sort of statements are coming from across, and we should also tell them that what sort of response is going to go from our side, so that they feel, what sort of conflict can take place between two nuclear states. So I think overall Pakistan side has shown confidence. They have shown patience, and our statements are more balanced and more having more depth. But I just hope and pray that the Indian forces, they don't go for another blunder. Already they have seen what they did in February, and this would be their third blunder. First being the changing of the status of Kashmir, second the Citizen Act, and now if they are thinking of attacking Azad Kashmir, then I think all this may culminate in actually in the independence of Kashmir. That is what I see.
Right. So the DGISPR said that this is irresponsible rhetoric against Pakistan by India's new army chief, and also former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has made statements regarding the politicization of the armed forces in India, which we're seeing recently. He said that all this has been done to draw attention away from the unpardonable acts of Prime Minister Modi's government on the economic front, and as far as jobs and rural distress are concerned. And he was a strong critic of the politicization of the Indian army, which we're seeing now, and also, sir, that there seems to be more perks and benefits of Indian army generals who, tend to speak the rhetoric of the BJP and this extremist sort of angle.
I think I'm inclined to call it irresponsible, all right, but not rhetoric. I would not say that, and we should not, lull ourselves in this thing that maybe it is a rhetoric, because the things are not in the control of Naseema Rao now. They are. We know that BJP is in the hierarchy, which is now controlling the BJP. We know all of them. Look at their defense ministers, look at their foreign ministers, look at their prime minister, and now the army chief. I think their thinking is a bit, I would say, not blurred. It seems for them it might be quite clear. So irresponsible it is, but I will differ with DGISPR once he say that it may be a rhetoric. I think we should take it seriously. They can actually practically go for it, although the outcome will be much against their wishes, inshallah, and because they can start the war, they cannot end it. Then it will be ended according to our own wishes, because we will go all out to not only respond to them, but we will also take advantage of that event and maybe we'll do something else which they are not expecting. I think Nasima Rao is whatever he's saying is good enough. But now we are in the hands of Modi. The government is in the hands of Modi, and we know that he can go to any extent after looking at what he did with Kashmir and what he did with the Citizen Act. So irresponsible, yes. Rhetoric, no.
Right. So also we're seeing that the Prime Minister Modi's government is now increasingly relying on the Indian army in Indian occupied Kashmir, for example. There's 900,000 military troops over there, and there's also military around the country to quell the protests. And then we saw the former Indian army chief, who was also very aggressive about Pakistan, get a new position, Chief of Defence Staff. So we're sort of seeing the Indian general sort of cooperate in these extreme clampdowns on protesters, etc., in Indian occupied Kashmir. And now this recent aggression with more heightened aggression with Pakistan seems to be giving them more sort of benefit and extensions, etc.
Actually, whenever whenever the nature of problem is political, armies cannot really deal with it because kinetics is not the answer. So actually, in my perception, Indian government is employing the wrong tool to resolve the Kashmir issue, even if they want to resolve it in their way or the way they think, because our army will not be able to do it. We know it very well, unless there is a very big political initiative which is not in sight. So yes, army will keep benefiting. The top brass of army will keep benefiting from their attitude. And in fact, some retired army officers, Indian army officers, have very candidly brought out this thing which Nasima Rao was saying, that the armed forces are being used as political tools for political purposes. Definitely, this will not work. But if whenever enemy does something bad, not that we should be very happy, but we should remain alert, all right. But I think we need not interrupt them. Let them keep on going on the slippery path.
Right. I've also now got online with me Begum Abida Hussain, who's a former ambassador of Pakistan. Ma'am, thank you for joining us on our program.
Hello.
Ma'am, thank you for joining us on Newsroom.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I'd like to ask your opinion at the moment about now recently the top diplomat for the United States for South and Central Asia, Alice Wells, has made certain remarks about India before her visit to New Delhi. She said that she's concerned about the detention of political leaders and residents and internet restrictions in Indian occupied Kashmir, and she's also hoped for a return to normalcy. What do you think that these statements and her visit in Delhi at the moment might lead to? Ma'am, can you hear me? Begum Abda Hussain. Okay. It seems to be that we've lost the ambassador at the moment. Sir, General Lodi, I'd like to come back to you at the moment while we try and get ma'am back online. I'd like to ask you about Alice Wells's visit right now in India. Do you think that this might bring about any, positive change? Maybe they'll allow her access to the region.
Are you asking me?
Yes, sir.
What I would say is that just wait for a few hours because the UN Security Council's meeting is due to discuss the Kashmir issue, and the United Nations observers are going to give their observations, and the attitude will America will become very clear whatever is the outcome of this meeting, because I think that Americans, they have deep strategic relations with India, and irrespective of what they say, keep an eye what they actually do. And this would be a very good litmus test, whatever is happening tonight, according to us tonight and American daytime. So I don't really believe what Alice is saying about her concerns. It is the 6th month going, and after 6 months, they have only been able to show their concerns, whereas they could have always stopped their strategic partner from these atrocities and all this clampdown and all that, which they have hardly, relented in that.
Right.
So I don't know.
We've just got again online Begum Abida Hussain. I'd like to just ask, ma'am, thank you for joining us again online.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ma'am, I was just asking General Lodi, and I'd like to ask you this as well from a diplomatic angle, that Alice Wells is right now visiting New Delhi, and she's made some comments before her trip there that she is concerned about the situation in Indian occupied Kashmir by the detentions, etc., and that she hopes for a return to normalcy. Do you expect anything to come out of this visit as far as the people of Kashmir are concerned? Hello, Begum Abida Hussain, can you hear me? Okay, it seems to be that we're having trouble connecting with the ambassador again today. We're having this issue. Sorry, General Lodi, please continue with what you were saying.
So what I was saying that we have to look at the actions because America is a superpower. They have
Right.
very good relations and deep strategic relationship with India. They could have at least put some pressure on them to lift the curfew, to relax this clampdown, which I think only partially they have done, and they could have asked them to allow the humanitarian, people coming to occupied Kashmir and looking for themselves. So they only, took some selected ambassadors, and many of them they refused from, especially from European Union. So I don't think that America is putting enough pressure on India to allow even some very basic things. For example, provision of food or provision of medicine, and allowing, people, media people going there and finding out themselves what is happening. So I believe more in actions rather than words. So let us see how they succeed in influencing India to actually doing something, which has not happened so far.
Right, exactly. So you'd mentioned that the EU diplomats that were invited to visit Kashmir, they refused, they turned down the offer because they were not being allowed to visit the prisoners, the political leaders in Indian occupied Kashmir, and they were not allowed to move around freely over there. So there's still restriction on access in the region, it seems, for foreign observers.
All right, and that is for the right reason from the Indian point of view, because now 100% population in the valley, and more than 90% of Kashmiri population elsewhere, they are now totally against not only BJP but against all these machinations of India, Indian armed forces, Indian police, and everything. So they are totally alienated. So whosoever goes there and actually interacts with them, and under free environment, they would come to know about many facts which even we do not know by now. How many people have been martyred? How many women have been raped? And how many youngsters have been detained? So these figures, they are trying to hide. And if all these things they come up openly, naturally there will be a lot of reaction from the international community, if not from nation states. So that is the reason that they are putting all these limitations on the people around. So far, we can say that still the clampdown is there in some form. Only partial internet services are allowed. I think they were also they keep interrupting them, and there's a total you can say house arrest of most of the youngsters. Many of them have been taken away. We do not even know how many have been martyred. So all these things can only come up if there's a free interaction allowed between the foreign media people and the local population, which is not happening so far.
Right. So, but digital rights activists have said that just the internet blackout itself is a human rights violation on its own, due to the fact that nowadays a lot of processes take place over the internet other than communications between families. There's businesses that people have on the internet. A lot of internet-based businesses in the valley have shut down. A lot of businesses have suffered in Indian occupied Kashmir, and many business leaders are moving to elsewhere, other parts of the country as well.
All right. I mean, this IT and internet, we all know, is everything nowadays. Whether it is education, or it is normal communication between families, or it is business, or it is any official, errand. So actually, whenever you stop IT services and internet, you actually stop all activity in a region. And we know it, and you know it, and the world knows it. So what they have actually done is that they have circumvented all economic activities. They have circumvented all social activities. They are not allowing any communication between the dear ones which are residing outside. So that makes the community inside occupied Kashmir highly stressed. And then the other side of the picture, that the international community, they are not knowing, they don't get to know that what is happening over there. So this is a sort of two-way, I would say, blackout. Not only that the people within the valley are suffering, but the people who need to communicate with them from outside, they are also suffering. And I'm sure that many businesses outside Kashmir must also be suffering, which are related to the Kashmir region. So I don't know that we keep on saying that where is the conscious, the international conscious. Actually, I always thought that there's no such thing as international conscious. It is only, maybe the international community or the media may be having some conscious. Otherwise, the nation states, they are very cool, like a steel. They only look after their interests. And that is what is happening.
Right. Sir, your final comment on the situation in India. Now, it seems that the BJP has inducted its rank and file into all its main institutions, the military, the judiciary, you have the bureaucracy, the police, everything. So what recourse do the common citizens have right now in India, where you're seeing that they're protesting all over the country, and also the situation in Indian occupied Kashmir? What outlet do they have to actually get some sort of justice?
Right. This is a fact that you've said it yourself. It is much more in occupied Kashmir and in a big way elsewhere also in the mainland, Indian mainland. But one thing we all know, that whenever the people rise, and this time, people have risen irrespective of the religion and caste. Every sane mind in India, they know that whatever BJP has done is wrong and not sustainable and against the ethos of the basis of that country. So I don't think that BJP government will be able to sustain these activities for very long, because whenever there's a massive reaction from civil society, and if that reaction is all inclusive, then I think no government can stand against it. And this is the outcome what I also expect, that ultimately they'll have to give up, or their plans will have to either they'll be watered down plans, or they will all be shattered. So this is
Right.
what is the likely outcome, and all happening because of the martyrs of Kashmir. This is, this nonsensical ways which BJP is adopting. First, that they change the status of Kashmir. Secondly, the Citizen Act. And third, these, telling us that they are going to attack Azad Kashmir. All this combined, I would say, is a reaction of what actually the Kashmiri movement, the sacrifices which they have given. And ultimately, all these three blunders combined will result in Kashmir's independence, inshallah.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us online, General Naeem Khalid Lodi. And now we're going to be talking about the extreme weather that we're seeing across the country. Parts of Balochistan and Azad, Jammu and Kashmir have been badly affected by avalanches and heavy snowfall. Let's have a look at this report.
Recent rains and snowfall in the country wreaked havoc, with close to 100 deaths in weather-related accidents. And there are fears that the number of casualties may further rise. Landslides, avalanches and heavy snowfall have cut connection of far-flung areas from the rest of the country, as rescue efforts are underway to reach the affected communities. Azad Kashmir remains the worst-hit region. Gilgit-Baltistan and Balochistan have also been badly affected. And there is another spell of rain and snow coming in the next few days. According to Director General Pakistan Meteorological Department Mohammad Riaz, the coming spell will not be as extreme as the previous one.
We expect some another wave in a coming days, so that is not so much intensified. We are not expected so much heavy rain activity as well as so much heavy snowfall activity in that. That is only confined to the northern part of the country.
Mohammad Riaz said the Met Office is constantly in touch with national and provincial disaster management authorities and providing them weather updates to prepare for relief efforts in advance. He said the extreme weather pattern the country has experienced cannot be entirely blamed on the climate change.
Climate change is not so much that it's already happened, and their impacts on weather system is already that is doing, and because sometime it intensify. But if we think if the climate change is giving us heavy rain and heavy snow. So I'm saying that it is a good change.
DG Met is of the view that there is a silver lining to the extreme rains and snow. He said such rains and snow prove to be lifeline during summers by keeping glaciers alive and water levels up.
Right, so we're seeing this extreme weather and what it's causing across parts of Pakistan. We have with us in our studio now Ms. Mariam Shabir, who's a climate expert. Let's ask her opinion about what's happening and what we're going to expect. Thank you for joining us today on our program, Mariam. I would like to ask you now, we're seeing that, this is kind of unprecedented. We haven't seen such extreme cold around Pakistan. It does get cold in Swat and places like that, but -6 in Quetta and -3 in Swat, in places like Skardu. What do you think about this? Is this due to climate change? We saw that the DG was saying that maybe it's not. What is your opinion on this?
I think every extreme climatic events, whether these are floods or heavy rains or snowfall, these are all human-induced activities, and these are, of course, impact of climate change. And climate change impact, you were mentioning that we haven't seen such impact in previous years. So let me just explain that the climate change impact is not an impact in 5 to 10 days or 5 to 10 weeks. It is impact of decades, 2 decades, 3 decades. After 3 to 4 decades, you see really impact of climate change. So due to deforestation and anthropogenic activities over there, earthquake, natural as well as anthropogenic activities, when they combine, then such kind of extreme climatic events happen. So yes, this is happening because of climate change.
Right, because now if I can remember back when I did my degree in environmental science as well, this was in the late 90s, almost 2000, and at that time our British professors at the University of East Anglia, they had told us that this is going to happen 10 years from now, 20 years, and this is exactly what's happening. They had predicted this, and different organizations and universities and scholars had researched this, and they had predicted this. So this is exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing extreme temperatures in the summer, extreme heat, droughts, and now we're also seeing these extreme cold spells in Pakistan. So Mariam, I'd like to ask you now, this is now, it's becoming a humanitarian crisis. So naturally, this is the job of the NDMA, etc., disaster management agencies to handle. But going forward, how do you feel that we need to mitigate against these extreme cold weather events? Are we going to be seeing these now on a regular basis?
I think, yes, this is going to happen, and we cannot control or mitigate really anytime soon. But of course, with the passage of time, in maybe 5 years or next 10 years, we can really mitigate. Instead, I really support mitigation, but this is more of adaptation. I don't think so that these extreme climatic events, in my opinion, would go back to normal events, because this is going to happen. In summer, you will see floods and heat waves in areas of Karachi and Sindh. So people really have to adapt with these, and we really need to improve our infrastructure to really cope with it, because due to these avalanches, we have seen a lot of deaths and houses were damaged. So infrastructure is one thing that government can do and really support in it. And on individual level, of course, adaptation is the one thing to survive.
Right. I mean, Karachi is now seeing a cold spell in November and December, which we've never seen before. Karachi is very mild weather in these months. And so now people have to sort of get used to this is going to be happening. Islamabad is getting about 4 months of cold now. We don't expect it to end until March. Previously, we had about 2 months. So we have to, I think, adapt our homes and ourselves also to keep warm in this weather. But the main thing here is the disasters that are happening, the natural disasters, the houses collapsing, the roads, infrastructure not being enough, like you're saying. Our building codes need to be sort of adjusted, because the poorer people, these events affect people in the lower socioeconomic underdeveloped areas. And that's because they don't have solid houses also, because they can't afford it. So building codes, urban planning, how important is this going forward?
Yes, like I mentioned in your previous question's response, that it is highly important to really work on infrastructure. We have seen that a lot of people were dying in Karachi because of heat wave in summers. That's because of the urban structure we have in Karachi. People didn't even have access to water. And that's where they had to establish a lot of centers so that people can get there and take shower and they can reduce heat in their body. So infrastructure is really important, and I think it's important for every city. It's that's where I think private sector needs to come forward. Not only government can do at their own, because they do not have enough resources to construct a lot of buildings. We need to understand that. So experts and private sector needs to come together in such, like in summers in cold ways in winters, in areas of Mitti and Sindh. That is also happening, and people are not ready for that. So yes, one is their capacity buildings to cope with such environments, and second is infrastructure in which private sector and researchers both can come together. Researchers can inform private sector and take them on board that, look, this is going to happen in summers as well, because extreme heat wave would happen across country, not only in Karachi but other parts of Pakistan as well. And in winters we see a lot of snowfall and irregular rainfall. So yes, infrastructure is important, but with informed evidence based from the scientists, of course.
And how about energy efficient housing? Because you're talking about now extreme heat and extreme cold. So if the houses are made to conserve energy and to conserve electricity, for example, they stay cool in the summer and warm in the winter, that would save a lot of costs as well. And in say, for example, the Prime Minister's housing program, if those are made as energy efficient houses, that will be less costly for the people who will be living there also, and it'll keep them warmer, and they'll be able to beat the heat.
Yeah, it's really brilliant idea to do it, but I don't see it happening in Pakistan anytime soon, because we are at developing stage. But if private sector or government together can do it, that would be really great. But it needs a lot of resources and technical input, which we really don't have at this stage.
Right. If we can ban plastic bags in Islamabad, I think we can manage to do anything. But I'd also like to ask you now, Mariam, that with all this extra rainfall and snow that we're getting, how important is it that we start to maybe harvest this rainwater and all, because then we have water shortage as well later on in the year?
Yes, this is really a good idea to really save water out of that, but we don't have infrastructure for that as well. As environmentalists, I don't really support the idea of dams, bigger infrastructure, because that also has consequences on your environment and communities. You get displaced because of that. But smaller infrastructure can be used to store water at domestic level, at homes, but in the times of crisis where people are losing their homes and their lives, I don't think so they will be able to harvest and see this unprecedented rainfall and snowfall as an opportunity to save water.
Right. So, Mariam, now I'd like to ask you this: as far as the government level efforts are concerned, we've talked about infrastructure and all of that's needed. Naturally, there's a lack of funds, but how about the current climate change policy? How effective do you think that is, and where do you think that more work needs to be done in that regard?
I think if I see current government, there are of course some loopholes as well in climate change policy as well, and that needs improvement, and there are a lot of policy
Billion
reviews.
tree tsunami is a big help, but what else do you think needs to be done?
With this current government, it is doing great initiatives, not only in energy, but also plastic bag banks. If you see, then 10 billion tree tsunami, I was telling you in the start of this segment that deforestation is also a major cause of extreme climatic events. So yes, trees are very important. It retains water. It also helps to control damage during floods and also during snowfall and unprecedented rainfalls, of course.
And it stops landslides.
Yes, I think that's the cheapest way to mitigate or to live with such extreme climatic events. But it's very important to understand that we need to plant indigenous and local trees that will support your other species, that will retain your other species and also control your temperatures as well in season. So yes, this is going to help a lot. And then plastic bag bans and some. So with this PTI government, I really see a lot of positive changes, and this electric vehicle policy, this is also going to minimize air emissions, which also causes this extreme climatic events. So this will also control that. So
Right.
there are a lot of things
definitely-
happening.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of awareness, and
Yes.
like you're saying, a lot of positive steps, but there's still a huge monumental task ahead, as in everything else in the country. So, you know, hopefully they'll be able to get to all of it. And as far as extreme weather events go in Pakistan, now we're seeing, we're seeing avalanches, heavy snowfall, heavy rainfall. In the summer, extreme heat, we're seeing floods and all. There's also glaciers melting in the northern areas, which is this can be a potentially huge problem for Pakistan's future water supply, and it also contributes to floods.
Yeah, that also contribute to flood, and that is also because of anthropogenic activity. You know, this deforestation, this everything is interlinked. Deforestation, your habits, your carbon footprints, coal and fossil fuels which we use, that also produces carbon emissions. Then you know, vehicles that produces bad smoke and air emissions and particulate matter. These all collectively contribute to such things. So yes, glaciers are also melting because of those issues as well, and there is no check and balance. Once I was in a visit in Gilgit-Baltistan, and I visited some of the areas because of my research, and there I witnessed that local people over there, they go all the way to glaciers and they cut that ice and they sell it into market. So that also needs to be controlled. So everything has to do with you know, by humans. This is induced by humans, of course. It has nothing to do. Of course, avalanches happen naturally as well when there is earthquake or such activity. There is movement of plate tectonics. There is something natural which we cannot control, but things which we can control should do it at our own. At least at individual footsteps should be you know, followed to reduce carbon emissions.
Right, and it's been said that more than the threat of terrorism, the biggest issue for Pakistan's national security is right now climate change, because being a developing country, that's a huge threat that we're facing, and we're seeing what it's causing. Now, if you look at the economy, agriculture can be really gravely affected by climate change. Your comments on that?
Yeah, it is really affecting, but let me just tell you that this is not the only issue in Pakistan. This is issue you will see worldwide. In Europe in summers, we have seen that there was heat waves in almost every region, and they have experienced very high temperatures this summer. And in winters, they are also experiencing very low temperatures. But Pakistan is, since developing country, it is not contributing much to the emissions, but it is most vulnerable because we don't really have any mechanism to deal with that. We are not prepared. Preparedness is needed. We lack resources. We lack funding.
And it hits the underprivileged, underdeveloped areas the most.
True. That's true. So yes, climate change also affects our agriculture. It has changed the pattern of sowing and harvesting, and it has delayed
because
those
of the rainfall
periods.
pattern changes.
And yes, the rainfall pattern changes are also because of these emissions, air emissions, which contribute. And one of the important factors, because since we are mentioning agriculture, we need to understand that agriculture really contribute very less to the economy and GDP. So we really need to think of more innovative ways to earn money. Maybe farmers can grow vegetables or other you know, suitable things which can give great access to the markets, and which can, you know, improve their soil fertility as well. And since we were talking about agriculture, so one thing which needs to mention is that after crop harvesting at the end of summer season, the residue is burnt in the fields, which is also contributed to air emissions, and that is one of the big issue that where we face smog issue in most of the areas of Punjab and KP.
Right. Okay. So now, as a final, your final thoughts, Mariam, as a climate expert, what is the most important? What are the most important steps at the moment going forward? Does our country need to take in order to keep ourselves safe from all these things that we're talking about related to climate change?
I think I was mentioning before as well in this segment that this current government has taken a lot of positive steps which will contribute to improve a lot in our environment. But since I was telling that climate change is something that takes a lot of time to show its impact, so even billion tree tsunami in KP will take almost 5 to 10 years to really show its impact. So 10 billion tree tsunami in whole Pakistan will also take years to show its impact. But to begin with, at individual level, what we can do is that we need to change the way we live our life. We need to really change our lifestyles and consumption patterns of food and fabric we wear and clothes we wear. That also contribute a lot into environment, because leather industry and textile also pollutes our environment greatly. And we really need to promote such transportation system which contributes less to the environment, like BRT in Karachi. It is initiative also by PTI government, which will be under Green Climate Fund, which Malik Amin Aslam has announced, which is great step. So there are a lot of positive steps happening, but it will take time to show
and
its
there's
impact.
monumental work ahead. It's not a small task. Thank you so much, Mariam Shabir, for joining us on our program. That's all the time for Newsroom today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.